I have some shit lined up there. We got no fuel over the Atlantic Ocean, air crash investigations. I need to get my air crash investigations in still, cause I be enjoying them shits low key. I don't know why, but I want to crash myself on a plane. God forbid I crash on a plane. I will never crash on a plane. Word too, bro. But nigga, we finna get into this. No fuel over the Atlantic Ocean. Let's see what's up. What's happening? What's up? Alright.
Mayday, Mayday, Mayday! Air Transat 236.
Who made the word Mayday, Mayday kind? Like, who just says they're crashing and then who just says Mayday, Mayday, Mayday? You know what I'm saying? Like, the fuck? Like, I would be screaming and shit, but niggas want to say Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Nah, that shit weird for real, gang. I'm gonna be screaming at the top of my lungs, not Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. The fuck Mayday gonna do for me, can't? Back. Mayday's gonna
right
do
engine
nothing
has
for
flamed
me.
out, and we're down to just a few hundred kilograms of fuel left.
Flying halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, the captain of an Airbus A330 carrying 293 passengers and 13 crew members declared a mayday.
That's
Just
cooked.
minutes after his call, the situation worsened when the left engine also flamed out, leading to all lights shutting off and the deployment of oxygen masks due to the loss of cabin pressurization. In
No
complete
way.
darkness, and with the aircraft's
What?
electrical systems switched to
Now what? Imagine your plane going off in the middle of a flight. That's
emergency
crazy.
configuration, the pilots struggled to control the aircraft, working
Oh
hard to keep
my.
it flying. Meanwhile, the crew quickly prepared the passengers for a potential emergency water landing, aware that their chances of
Jeez.
survival were slim. This is the
Oh
story
my
of Air
goodness.
Transat Flight 236.
But that must be scary, heel. That's scary, heel, boy. Nah, that's crazy. That's scary, heel, bree.
On August 24,
Airbus,
2001,
yeah.
Air Transat
Wait, ain't the Neo? Oh, that was the Boeing actually. The Boeing freaking Max. Nah, the Boeing Max. That was the greatest downhole in history. I saw what happened about the Boeing Max,
Flight
bro.
236
Crazy.
was pushed back from the gate at Toronto Pearson Airport, Canada, with destination Lisbon
How
Airport,
you have no
Portugal.
fuel in your plane,
The
can?
route from Toronto to Lisbon crosses the Atlantic
That does
Ocean.
not make sense.
Starting in Canada, it travels over the western Atlantic, crossing towards the European mainland before reaching Lisbon. This flight typically
Lisbon.
takes about 7 hours.
Jeez.
The aircraft designated for this flight was an Airbus A330, equipped with 362 passenger seats. Built in 1999, it had accumulated...
What? 1999? Wait. Why are we still operating with planes from 1999? The fuck? I know how it goes. I know planes are ahead of its time, but 1999, nigga? Update your planes, bro. The fuck?
over 10,000 flying hours by the time of the incident. It was loaded with approximately 46.9 tons of fuel, 5.5 tons more than the minimum legal requirement. In the cockpit of the aircraft, there were two pilots.
Wait, so
The
how did it
captain
run
was
out of fuel?
48-year-old Robert Pichet, who had nearly 17,000 flying hours, with almost 800 of those on the Airbus A330. He was joined by the
Jeez,
first
man.
officer, 28-year-old Dirk de Jager, who had
De
accumulated
Jager.
4,800 flying hours, 386 of which were on this specific aircraft type. 4 days before
Bro,
Air
that
Transat
must
Flight
be scary
236
as
took
hell,
off,
bro.
it underwent
Freedom.
routine maintenance. During this checkup, the maintenance team discovered metal chips in the aircraft's oil filter, a sign of potential engine trouble. Unable to pinpoint the source of these chips, they decided to replace the engine. The engine being installed, loaned
true.
by Rolls-Royce, was in a pre-service bulletin configuration, while the replaced engine was in a post-service configuration. This
What? Bro, there's so many technical difficulties, like, so many technical shit that goes into, like, you have to respect people in their jobs. Like, it may look easy, but it ain't easy for real, gang. It ain't
difference
easy.
caused an issue for the technician in charge. The rear hydraulic pump from the removed engine couldn't be fitted onto the replacement engine. The reason was a clash with the fuel pump inlet tube already installed on the loaned engine. Unable to access the service bulletins from the available computer terminals, the lead technician relied on advice from the maintenance engineering department. They recommended using only the rear fuel tube from the engine being replaced. By following this advice, the technicians were able to ensure there was enough space between the fuel tube and the nearby hydraulic tube. After installing the new engine, the technicians inspected the work and found no issues. The engine passed a ground run test, indicating it was functioning correctly, and the aircraft was approved for flight.
Aish. That's
Just
crazy.
before 1 in the morning, the Airbus took off. The pilots steered the aircraft eastward, ascending to a cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. The first hours of the flight went smoothly.
Imagine being a pilot, bro. I couldn't be a pilot, bro. I couldn't like prime my mind to be a pilot. Just, I don't know, bro. I just couldn't.
With no issues on board. It was a calm and routine journey as the plane continued steadily toward its destination. But several hours into their journey, while halfway across the ocean, the pilots encountered something unusual. Upon checking the secondary display for engine readings, they spotted abnormalities in the right-hand engine's data. The oil pressure was unusually high, paired with a lower oil temperature and a decrease in oil quantity. These warnings presented a scenario that the pilots couldn't immediately understand. Normally, engine oil temperatures increase during a flight. So, when the pilots saw the oil temperature going down, they were confused. They looked through the manual to find an explanation. But they couldn't find anything that explained the strange readings they were seeing.
Jeez.
The pilots reported the issue to their maintenance control center, asking for further investigation. However, the center also couldn't determine the cause of the problem. What the pilots didn't know was that the issues with the engine oil indications were caused by a massive fuel leak deep inside the right-hand engine. A serious mistake was made while replacing the engine. The hydraulic and fuel lines were placed too close to each other. Even though they believed there was sufficient space between them, they didn't consider how the pressure from the hydraulic system could affect them.
No way. Oh, that's
the hydraulic
so bad.
and fuel lines of the right engine were in continuous contact, slowly wearing down against each other.
Jeez, that's
Eventually,
cooked,
this
bro.
friction caused the fuel line to rupture, resulting in a significant hole. According to the final report, the aircraft was losing an estimated 12 to 15 tons of fuel per hour through this rupture, an immense contrast to the typical fuel consumption of about 2.6 tons per hour for an Airbus engine. But even with the significant fuel leak, the engine kept running as usual. The fuel system design of the aircraft plays a significant role in this. The fuel system of this Airbus is designed with multiple fuel tanks. Each wing contains 2 tanks, along with a center tank and a trim tank located in the tail's horizontal stabilizer. The trim tank serves the purpose of redistributing fuel from the back to the front of the aircraft to maintain its central gravity limits. As fuel levels decrease in the wing tanks, the trim tank automatically transfers fuel forward to the depleted wing tanks. This transfer is normally not scheduled to take place until 35 minutes from the destination airport, when the wing tanks are below 4 tons or when the aircraft descends below flight level 245. This process ensures a balanced fuel distribution for landing. However, in this instance, the trim tank initiated its final fuel transfer prematurely, directing all its remaining fuel forward into the wing tanks much earlier than usual. Despite there being an indication in the cockpit, the pilots did not immediately recognize the abnormality. While still dealing with the oil pressure issue, an advisory message flashed on the ECAM. It's the central display unit in the cockpit, and it alerts the pilots when action is needed. It was an advisory message. The message noted a fuel imbalance between the tanks in the left wing and those in the right wing. A fuel imbalance means that there's more fuel in the tanks of one specific wing than in the other, which is a problem because the aircraft needs to be balanced. When dealing with a fuel imbalance on the Airbus A330, there aren't any specific actions outlined in the ECAM. Instead, the ECAM simply alerts pilots to the imbalance, prompting them to refer to the Quick Reference Handbook for guidance. This handbook is designed to guide pilots through non-normal
Bruh, how
procedures.
many handbooks
Given their
they have,
familiarity
bro?
with handling
Like, pilots deadass, like, have to go through so much stuff. Niggas talking about this manual, this handbook, like, how do they have the time to read this, bro? God damn.
imbalances from simulator training, the captain decided to rely on their experience and memory rather than consulting the Quick Reference Handbook. They opened the crossfeed valve and shut off the fuel pumps in the right wing, intending to transfer fuel from one side to the other. However, unbeknownst to them, this action only worsened the fuel leak, as fuel was being directed from the left-wing tank through the damaged right side of the aircraft.
Oh no.
Had they consulted the QRH, the first instruction would have cautioned against proceeding with the checklist if a fuel leak was suspected. Within
Jeez,
just
man.
10 minutes, as they watched the fuel levels drop rapidly, the pilots realized that the total amount of fuel remaining on board had fallen below the level necessary to safely reach Lisbon. Facing
Oh
this critical
my
situation,
goodness.
they began
Jeez.
exploring alternative landing sites. In the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the pilots had limited options. They identified Leges Airport, located on the island of Terceira in Portugal, as a viable diversion point. As the pilots considered their diversion strategy, a cabin crew member entered the cockpit to inform them about passengers requiring assistance upon arriving at Lisbon Airport. The pilots explained the urgent need to divert to another airport due to a technical issue. They requested the cabin crew member
Bro,
to
this is
visually
some
check the wings.
Scary
Following
shit,
the
bro.
pilot's instructions, the crew member dimmed the cabin lights for a clearer view and used a flashlight to inspect the wings from the cabin windows.
Oh my
Despite the thorough
goodness.
check, no irregularities were detected. A fuel leak would be relatively easy to detect during daylight hours, but spotting one at night becomes significantly more challenging. Because there were no signs
this
of a
is
fuel
cooked,
leak,
chat.
other than the lower than expected quantity of fuel on board, and with no additional ECAM warnings or alerts, both pilots concluded that the issue was likely a computer malfunction. The pilots considered doing the standard fuel leak procedure, but decided against it.
What?
Could it be a fuel leak? Should we start with the standard fuel leak procedure?
Nah, they should have done it, bro.
We would then have to descend to a lower altitude, which would worsen the situation.
Understood.
Oh my
Investigators
goodness,
later
brother.
concluded that if the pilots had executed any of the prescribed fuel leak procedures upon diverting to Leges, whether it was the engine fuel leak procedure, the wing fuel leak procedure, or the fuel leak not located procedure, they would have landed with at least 3.8 metric tons of fuel on board. The captain's decision not to follow the fuel leak procedure was influenced by a common thinking mistake known as framing bias. This kind of
What do you
bias
mean,
happens
framing
when
bias?
people get stuck on one way of looking at a problem and only pay attention to information that supports that view, while ignoring evidence that doesn't fit. In this
Oh,
case,
shoot.
the pilots thought the issue was just a computer error, so they focused on clues that seemed to confirm that idea. Because they were so focused on this belief, they didn't consider other important signs that could have pointed to a different problem. Pilots found themselves
man.
immersed in a whirlwind of tasks,
I
communicating.
don't even know who to blame, because it's like the technician niggas and then you got the pilot niggas too, bro. It's like, it's a... I don't know,
with
man.
maintenance control, conducting checklists, and coordinating with cabin crew and air traffic control for the diversion. Amidst this hectic environment, they struggled to find a moment to step back and reevaluate their initial assumptions. Despite their recent attempt to address the fuel imbalance by transferring fuel between tanks, the problem didn't go away, and fuel continued to drain rapidly. In reaction to the
Jeez.
continued abnormally high rate of reduction in the fuel on-board quantity reading, the crew selected the right-wing fuel pumps to on and the left-wing pumps to off. These
No
selections
way.
established cross-feed of the fuel in the right-wing tanks to both engines. The pilots then set a course for Leges Airport. They notified Santa Maria Air Traffic Control of their diversion
Bro, so
citing
it
a
really could have
critical
been
fuel
prevented.
shortage.
Oh
By
my
this
goodness.
point, the aircraft was carrying 7 tons of fuel, which accounts for merely 6% of the aircraft's total fuel capacity. As the
Eesh.
fuel levels kept dropping at an alarming rate, the captain maintained communication with the maintenance control center. In an effort to resolve the problem, he experimented with various configurations of the fuel system. However, despite these attempts, the amount of fuel continued to decrease.
No,
Any remaining
bro.
doubts were quickly cleared when the right-hand engine flamed out, occurring as the aircraft was at flight level 390 and was 150 miles from the airport. In response,
Eesh.
the captain swiftly increased thrust to the remaining engine. Although the
Which
aircraft
engine?
could still stay airborne with only one engine functioning, maintaining an altitude of 39,000 feet was no longer feasible. At this critical juncture, the aircraft's
my
fuel
goodness,
dwindled
bro.
to a mere 600 kilograms. The pilots realized that they were facing a life and death situation. The
Oh
first officer
my.
declared an emergency to air traffic control.
That would have
Mayday,
been
Mayday,
cooked.
Mayday! Air Transat 2360. The right engine has flamed out, and we're down to just a few hundred kilograms of fuel left.
Oh my
Moments
goodness,
later,
bro.
The first officer used the public address system to inform the cabin crew and passengers that they would be landing shortly and to prepare for the possibility of an emergency water landing.
Bro, that's
13 minutes
peak.
after the right-hand engine flamed out and still 120 kilometers from the airport, the left-hand engine also flamed out.
What?
As
Why?
electrical power failed, the cockpit was enveloped in darkness. As the plane descended, the cabin pressure dropped, causing oxygen levels to decrease. Passengers and crew had to put their oxygen masks on.
Oh my gosh.
With both
no
engines
way,
having
brother.
stopped working, the aircraft lost its main source of electrical power. A crucial fail-safe mechanism, the ram air turbine, deployed from beneath the aircraft.
What's
As
that?
the plane moved through the air, this device harnessed the wind to generate a small amount of electricity, sufficient to keep the most important instruments and systems operational. However,
Nah,
the
that's
absence
cooked,
of
buddy.
engine power resulted in the loss of wing spoilers, nose wheel steering, and thrust reversers, making maneuvering and landing significantly more challenging for the pilots.
No
The crew finished the
way,
procedure
bro.
for when all engines stopped working and started gliding towards the airport. Here, the tower controller flickered the runway lights on and off to help the pilots find their way to the runway
No
amidst
way.
the darkness of the Atlantic Ocean.
Bro, so
To
they
stay in the
almost
air as long
land.
as possible, the captain maintained a descent speed between the recommended glide speed and the stall warning speed. This way, he could control how fast they went down. But it was important to stay high enough because once they went too low, they couldn't go back up. But
True.
the captain faced additional challenges. He needed to maintain the speed above 140
Bro,
knots
this must
to
be
ensure
scary
power
as
from
hell.
the ram air turbine, while also avoiding speeds over 200 knots, which could complicate landing gear extension. As they neared runway 33,
Oh my day.
he
this is
realized his
intense.
high altitude strategy might have worked too well. Instead
Why?
of being at the normal approach altitude of about 3,000 feet, 10 miles from the runway, they were at 13,000 feet, just 8 miles away. This
Oh
was much higher
my
than expected,
goodness.
especially with no engine power. To quickly drop altitude, the captain performed a 360-degree turn, a technique often used in gliding to lose about
What?
4,000 to 5,000 feet.
Say
At
where
the same
that
time,
works.
The first officer put down the landing gear and adjusted the slats at the front of the wings. These steps were vital, giving the plane more lift.
Bro, this
and
is
letting it
intense,
slow
bro.
down without taking
What?
After a 360-degree turn, the captain leveled the plane's wings as they neared the runway.
Bro,
However,
that's
they were still
crazy
dealing
work.
with being at the wrong altitude, too high for a normal landing approach, but too low to try another complete turn to lose altitude. With no room for mistakes, every move and decision was critical as the plane
Oh
headed for the
my
runway
goodness,
without any
brother.
opportunity for do-overs. On the final approach, the
This
first
is
officer
crazy.
carefully watched the airspeed. Because both engines flamed out, they couldn't use flaps, meaning they had to land at a much faster speed of about 200 knots instead of the usual 145 knots.
Bro,
The
hopefully
first
he gets
officer
them
played
done
a crucial role,
correctly.
constantly updating the captain on airspeed and altitude helping him manage the challenging
Bro,
landing.
this is scary. Ay, ay, yo, wee.
Moments later, the aircraft hit the
No
runway
way.
hard, causing 8 out of 12 tires to burst. The plane bounced back into the air before touching down again, almost
what?
3,000 feet from the start of the runway. As the plane sped down the runway, slowing it down became a major challenge. Important
No way,
features
this
that
scary,
usually
bro.
help slow the plane, like wing spoilers and engine reverse thrust, were not working.
Oh
To make
my
things more
goodness.
difficult, the system that prevents the wheels from skidding didn't work properly, causing the wheels to lock up when the captain tried to use
Brother,
the
brother. Did they
The
land?
aircraft managed to stop just 600 feet short of the runway's end.
Oh
Fires
my
had broken out
goodness.
in the left main gear wheels, heightening the emergency. Captain Pichet quickly ordered an evacuation, and remarkably, all passengers were out of the aircraft in just 90 seconds, securing their safety.
Jesus,
The fire crews,
man.
already on standby, quickly put out the fires. Incredibly,
Jeez,
all
man.
passengers and crew on board survived the
Nah,
ordeal.
that's so good.
Following their miraculous landing, the event was marked as the longest glide by a passenger aircraft in aviation history without any fatalities.
That's
The
crazy.
crew was initially celebrated as heroes. However, as time passed, questions surfaced about the events leading to the critical fuel shortage over the Atlantic. Doubts
True,
began
true.
to circulate regarding the crew's decision-making, especially why they appeared to overlook their instruments' warnings of rapidly decreasing fuel levels.
Yeah,
Following
that's true.
the incident, significant changes were made to aviation safety protocols.
Nah,
Airbus
you have
introduced
to.
a new warning system in their flight management computers, designed to alert pilots to a significant fuel loss, a key indicator of a potential fuel leak. Moreover, training now emphasizes the effective management of fuel leaks and the interpretation of non-normal checklists more strongly. The final report acknowledged the pilot's failure to detect the fuel leak, but praised their exceptional response after the engines failed.
Nah, at least they saved the
It
aircraft.
commended the captain
Damn.
for expertly controlling the aircraft during the engine's out-descent and landing, despite the challenging conditions.
Bro, I
The
hope
first
no one
officer was
died.
praised for providing valuable support during the glide and landing. The captain and first officer were therefore honored with the Superior Airmanship Award by the Airline Pilots Association. In conclusion, 3 primary factors contributing to the incident can be identified. Firstly, the improper installation of the spare engine was identified as the root cause of the fuel leak.
True,
Secondly,
true.
the crew's lack of training in handling fuel leak-related imbalances and the absence of such scenarios
Bro,
led
they
them to
could've
focus
died,
solely
bro.
on balancing fuel without
Lucky them
considering
is
the
a lion,
possibility
man,
of a
damn.
leak. Lastly, cognitive bias played a role, as the crew's assumptions hindered their ability to recognize and address the situation effectively. Let's
Cognitive
think
bias,
about
bro.
what we can learn from this important story.
Nah, I don't want to learn anything. Fuck off.